Welcome back for the closing session of Agnes Scott's Women's Global Leadership Conference. Thank you all so much for hanging in here with us. It's a gorgeous afternoon in Atlanta, so we're all getting ready to head outside at 5 o'clock, but we have a closing session that I think you're going to be really happy that you stayed online or in the auditorium with us for. So I've introduced myself a couple of times, but I'm Susan Kidd. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Sustainability at Agnes Scott and one of the co-chairs for the program for the conference. And I'm going to take 1 minute to do something that people tell you is risky, but you know, I've been working a long time, so I'm used to taking risks. And I'm going to thank some people by name. First, I want to thank again the co-chairs for the program committee, Dr. Lauren Wentworth and Dr. Stacey Dutton. We were talking yesterday about how fortunate we've been at a real seamless level of partnership in our work, that each person would pick up where somebody had to leave off, whether it was a family emergency or a quick break or their work schedule causing that to happen. And I'm just so grateful to the two of them. And I also drew the short straw that I would do these intros and wrap-ups. And so I just want to say, for me, they're here with me every time I'm up here at the podium. So thank you both. I want to thank Gundolf Grommel and Honey Migdal. And this is where I'm really choosing who I saw as the leaders, both of the overall conference, in Gundolf and Honey for the logistics side. And I watched both of them work again against the odds of their regular jobs and putting this conference first so many times. So I'm really, really grateful to the two of them. And then really everyone, I'm not going to try to name all the people behind the scenes because there are way too many, from our AV sound guys to our consultant Candy, but also our staff team. But I'm going to just mention, just sort of representatively, and I think that'll be fine for the committee, two people that I've worked with the most, I've spent the most time with, and one is Caroline Ficken, who is probably running around somewhere right now dealing with some details, but she's been an amazing fellow that's in our grad programs, which take a look at our grad programs online if you haven't. Really spectacular programs that we have here now at Agnes Scott. And Caroline is an example of a great grad student and also worker. And then last but not least, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Carla Bosch, who is a sustainability fellow in the Center for Sustainability, and she's going to introduce our first speaker, who's going to manage the Q&A and the back and forth with our incredible keynote, Diane Dillon Ridgely. So Carla is one in a series of fellows we've had in the office. Each year, Agnes Scott hires one or more recent grads to work in the office to do sustainability work. And they're an impressive group that are now all out in the field of sustainability or in graduate school. And Carla was an international relations major with two minors, one in public health and one in environmental studies, environmental and sustainability studies. So she's a great example of an Agnes Scott student and recent grad in this field. And I wanted her to join me on the stage and introduce our first speaker. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to pass on some regards to my coworkers.
Thank you so much, Susan. Now I'll be introducing Zoe Moore. And Zoe Moore is an Arkansas native, is a 2021 Agnes Scott College alumna who majored in Africana Studies and double minored in Education and Environmental and Sustainability Studies. She is currently employed at the National Wildlife Federation as the first ever Diane Dillon Ridgely Fellow and attends Mercer University, earning a master's degree in secondary education. When she's not working, Zoe still continues her passion of advocating for environmental and racial justice and education equity as an education and outreach coordinator for Metro Atlanta Youth Energy Corps, a Metro Atlanta-based youth-led team committed to implementing energy equity programs that center youth leadership, racial and social justice, and local collaboration. Zoe is excited to continue learning as much as possible to be the change she wishes to see in the world. It's my pleasure to introduce Zoe Moore. Welcome, Zoe.
Hi, Carla. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be here. And it is my pleasure to introduce Diane Della Ridgely, who the fellowship is named after. You'll hear a lot from her. She's so inspiring and wonderful, and again, it's my pleasure. So Diane Della Ridgely is a lifelong advocate for human rights, women's empowerment, and sustainability. Diane Della Ridgely made her first foray into the environmental field as a college intern during the early days of the Environmental Protection Agency. Since then, the Dallas native has traveled around the globe promoting women's rights and fighting for environmental sustainability. For nearly a decade, she served as the UN representative for the World YWCA. She attended the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio by appointment of the White House, followed by the 1997 UN General Assembly on the results of Rio, and the 2002 World Summit on Sustainable Development in South Africa, the only person to have participated in all three US delegations. In 1999, she was appointed to the Oxford University Commission on Sustainable Consumption. She spent 10 years as chair of the US Partnership Education for Sustainable Development. She is a past trustee and current staff member of an array of organizations that are committed to sustainability, including Interface Incorporated, Green Mountain Energy, Center for International Environmental Law, Population Connection, the River Network, the Women's Environment and Development Organization, the Association of Iowa Human Rights Agencies, the Auburn University School of Human Sciences, and the University of Iowa Tepe School of Business Management. She also helped to found 100 Grannies for a Livable Future and Plains Justice, an environmental law center for the Great Plains region focused on ending the use of coal and promoting renewable energy adoption. She has served as the vice chair of the board for the Parliament of the World's Religions. In 2020, the National Wildlife Federation created an Environmental Justice Fellowship in Diane's name to honor her major commitment to NWF and other national environmental causes. NWF chose Agnes Scott College as the institution to select the first recipient from its graduating class of 2001. Diane served as a trustee of NWF for 9 years, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Diane Della Ridgely to the stage.
Thank you. Now, did you want to? We're still figuring some of these things out. We had a little bit of challenge, but I think I see my hand, so I assume that everything's okay on the audio and the visual, right?
Yes, we can hear you. And we can
Okay.
see you.
Okay. Well, I know you have some questions for me, and Zoe and I talked, and I just am so thrilled that Zoe was selected as the first. We call me DDR, which is sort of weird, but anyway, but to be the first person to take on the fellowship that I was so honored to be in my name has been just a sheer delight, because Zoe is the ultimate example of an Agnes Scott woman, and she has just been fabulous in that position. So I'm just thrilled that she's doing that. I also want to thank Susan Kidd, because Susan has been such a champion so many times on different issues. When the Green Leadership Trust wanted to come, Susan made the campus available so many times that I can't even count how many times Susan has stepped up between um, the work with Second Nature, with the climate summits for all campuses in the country. She's just been phenomenal time and time again. And I also want to thank President Zach, whom I'm just getting to know, and the entire Agnes Scott sisterhood. But Zoe and I talked earlier this week for about an hour and a half, and I thought long and hard about what would be the best way to contribute to the conference and to today. And I thought of all the times when I remember hearing someone who was, my hair is white, so I can claim being an elder and senior would say, well, I used to walk to school uphill both ways. And, when I was young, and how chilling that could sound. But so I'm not going to do it exactly that way. But I do think it's important to bring up a couple of points, because this centering and focusing on women's leadership is not new, particularly not in where
Oh,
I had my mentor, and I was somebody, something didn't work. My mentor, one of them, was a former Congresswoman, Bella Abzug. And in 1991, before the Earth Summit, we convened what was called the World Women's Congress for a Healthy Planet. And we are coming up on the 30th anniversary of that meeting, which was in Miami, and it brought together 1,500, as I like to say, 1,500 women and good non-women from 83 countries. And the reason I mention it is the conference was opened by Pat Mitchell and Wanjira Matai. Well, Wanjira is the daughter of Wangari, and Wangari and I met first in November of 1991, and we continued to be friends and colleagues for the next over 20 years. And yesterday you heard from Marianne Lanier, who is the president of the Ray Anderson Foundation. And I'm going to show you how all of these things came together. Ray passed away in August of 2011, and 6 weeks later, Wangari passed away. And I bring that up because it was very hard. I did eulogies for both of them at different services, and it was a time where one had to really come to grips with at a certain level. You have passed on now and been given a piece of the baton to carry forward and to go forward. So I really want all of the young women in particular, and as I say, good young non-women or men. I should just say I make that distinction because much of the institutional challenges that we encounter are patriarchy. They're not males, but they're patriarchal structures which have, by and large, excluded women's leadership in particular, not just for a little while, not even just for a couple of hundred years, but for thousands of years. And so I've always thought of this 21st century as the justice century. And it is in that claiming, expanding, owning, and stepping up to justice that we are only going to be able to achieve what we need to do in terms of meeting a climate crisis. And I might as well say something about that. It's interesting. I've tried to listen to as many sessions as possible since yesterday. And the session this morning with Catherine Wilkinson was particularly, I had to smile through so much of it. One of the young women, I think it may have been Saba, was talking about non-vertical leadership, but horizontal leadership. And there was also a point where we were talking about, how we have this existential crisis of the climate. Well, let's be clear. The climate crisis is the work that we have to address because we failed in the far more fundamental issue. We have not learned or remembered how to live sustainably on the earth. That's actually the culprit. If we were living sustainably on the earth, we would not be faced with this existential crisis that indeed is multi-generational, at least over 3 generations extant right now. And we have a very short timeline. A couple of people said earlier in the business session, so that we meet the two. No, we don't want to meet the 2 degrees. We want to stay lower than the 2 degrees. That was the negotiation that took place in Paris. But a couple other things that I want to say before I engage Zoe with her questions. As I was saying, the Miami conference was 4 of the most fundamentally incredible mind-shifting days that I have ever encountered. And one of the things that came out of that was that we realized that we have been poetic and have waxed eloquent for years on Mother Nature. Well, let me tell you something. Right now, Mother Nature is pissed. I hope that doesn't upset anybody in language. But if we haven't paid attention, I want us to stop calling them natural disasters. There's nothing natural about them right now. They are the direct result of, again, our failures to do things. And we need to be very, very careful about the language that we employ and use, because the power of language shapes. I was a philosophy and math major, so it shapes how you think about things, and how you think about something and the words that you use to describe it impacts your vision and what you can see in terms of how you, the energy and the solutions and the visions that you can bring to it. The other one, and this one I think is, it was one of those things that, like the epiphany moments. Someone was saying, well, we spent the last 35, 40 years politicizing the environment. And it dawned on me, yes, that's exactly what we've done. And that's too bad. Instead of politicizing the environment, particularly in the halls of legislatures and decision-making bodies, we should have environmentalized politics. In other words, we reduced the environment, our natural resource use, and ways in which we deal with it, we reduced it to a political issue. It is not a political issue. It is what we never live outside of our environment. We never live outside of that relationship. It is not an issue. It is where we are. So we should have not politicized the environment, but environmentalized politics. Couple other things. I have a little list. This summer in particular, as people have done the moon shots and the other things, I've had to think about kind of a masters of the universe approach to addressing these things, as so eloquently has been demonstrated through all of the work of Drawdown, which has been wonderfully highlighted over the past 2 days. Most of the knowledge and the information we have is something that we have to reclaim, to remember. It's not so much figuring out the next silver bullet, but it's in fact acting differently with the resources and the knowledge that we have failed to honor and to remember. And I use the word remember. I remember in 2008 and 9 when we had one of the periodic financial crises. And I remember afterwards, and people have said the same thing with the pandemic. They keep saying, when we get back to normal, when we go back, first of all, we as humans don't go back. One of my other mentors, Dorothy Irene Height, Dr. Height always said, I never go back. I always go on, forward, and up. And in that vein, we need to remember. Well, I thought about the word. We use it all the time, but we don't think about and unpack it critically. If you remember, at some point you had to member. And we have been very casual in not talking about when do we member society so that we can remember it, put it back together, but do it with humility. Do it without the hubris that we have brought that got us here. Otherwise, if you just hit a reset button, what's going to happen? You're going to end up back in the same place. So I wanted to say we fail to live sustainably on Earth. No silver bullets. We have the knowledge that we need. We need to respect all of the other institutions. We need to respect the other species with whom we live. This century, this 21st century, this justice century is also the century. And all of this is completely consistent with where we are, certainly in the United States, on a racial reckoning as well. It is completely consistent with all of this is happening at once, because it must happen all at once, because we have neglected it for so long. Right now, my house needs to be painted, and my house is not happy with me right now. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off and get it all done before winter. I live in Iowa for the last 40 years. If I'm going to be able to get it all done before autumn. But, it has been really lovely and has helped and gone along with this long enough. But my house finally just said, look, lady, we need to be painted. We need to be taken care of. And it's the same thing. If we want to continue to use language of stewards, and I understand that language, but it's a stewardship that comes with a responsibility. In the same way that people are always talking about, well, these are my rights. Rights always come with responsibilities. And for too long, we have addressed too much of what we have to do without the balances that we need to have in order to be clear around this. So, empathy. I've loved the words listening to uh, all of the young women, in particular, in the different sessions on the the private sector, and I think Wawa is the way she says her name. I don't have everybody's name down, but I really look forward to having many more opportunities to be engaged with absolutely incredible, wonderful leaders. I mean, the people always say, "Well, Diane, what can possibly still give you hope?" Well, one reason I have hope is that we have no other choice but to do this. And there's a book, and I will speak to this. Unfortunately, he passed away about two weeks ago. But there was a wonderful book, and it's somewhere here in front of me, called Women in Green. And I think I'm holding things up so they can be seen. And it was written by Lance Hosey and Kira Gould. Unfortunately, Lance passed away about 2 weeks ago, very, very suddenly. But in putting that book together, and there's a lot of Agnes Scott, a lot of Atlanta. One of the first interviews in that book is with Ray Anderson, where he was first starting to talk about, as Marianne mentioned yesterday, his hope is in the enlightened leadership of women being on the front stage. But they were kind enough to ask me to write the foreword to the book. And I thought of it as something of an essay and a descriptive of where we are. Females are half the world. Young people in particular are 2/3 or more of the world. And so if we just go through and look at all of the metrics, as we say, we have the resources. And I was so pleased to hear, nothing against, say, the Greta Thunbergs, but to listen to the names of the young people from that Wanjira was talking about yesterday. I've been on some Zoom calls with her from the Greenbelt movement, of the names of the young people who are brown and who are African and who are from Southeastern Asia and from Central Asia, who have been also, as much as everywhere else, clear voices of what it is that we need to do. So I'm just thrilled to be part of this process. This is the second of many, many, many conferences that you're going to have annually. I hope I can be included in some further, but I want to be mindful of the amount of time that we have. And I want to finish my presentation with a poem that's called The Women's Creed. That's a little tease, but I know, Zoe, did you have something that you wanted to particularly discuss in the way of kind of a exchange back and forth?
Well, first, thank you so much for your words of wisdom and guidance. I did have some questions that may be beneficial for our audience members as well as myself going forward into this environmental work. And so one question that I did have for you, you mentioned the justice century. And sometimes we know as working with the environment, it can be kind of depressing seeing all of the devastations going on in the world. So one question I have is, when and how can we judge the success for climate justice? And how will we know if we are successful?
Well, I now I don't remember which. It may have been. I'm not gonna try and remember her name. One of the young women this morning was saying much the same question, and I said, "Well, it's not exactly like baking bread. When you take the loaf of bread out of the oven, or off the cook fires, if it smells good and it tastes good, it was successful."
Right.
But she made the excellent point that much of the work that we're doing is truly incremental. And, I was blessed to have an amazing mother. In fact, I will say yesterday was the anniversary of my mother's passing. And so this is, in so many ways, I call it a heavy week for me. But she was a clinical psychologist, Evelyn Harding Dillon. Both my grandmothers, Rebecca Covington Harding, she went to Fisk. My mother went to Fisk undergrad and then Fisk and Vanderbilt for graduate school. My father and his brother, his older brother, Harold Bishop Dillon. So I can't leave anybody's name out now, and Gus Dillon. They were both instrumental in the dismantling. Thurgood Marshall was the attorney in dismantling the Jim Crow segregation with the University of Oklahoma for the case that ended up being Ada Lois Bishop, and there's lots of details. If we're interested, we can talk about that as a thing of its own at some point in the time. But my father then was in the first class of graduate students at Oklahoma State in engineering. And then my paternal grandmother, who was Nellie Scott Bishop Dillon, finished Tuskegee down the road in 1919. And I learned only in the last 2 years that she was the president of the YWCA on campus. And then she taught for a number of years at Langston University in Oklahoma as well. And I bring all this up to say we come from legacies. At one point, somebody said, "Well, who are you?" I said, "I am in this world clearly as a daughter and as a mother." And so now they can cringe because my son, DeSaul Ridgely, who finished Morehouse in 2004, and then my daughter, and I was telling President Zach, she was in the last class from Harvard that has a Radcliffe on her diploma, but she finished, was that in 1998, she finished at Harvard. But the point is, we are continuums. That is the point for us as humanity. And so I think there will be victories along the way, but I think one thing that's important to do is to decide, how do you wish to walk in the world? And I decided I want to walk in this world and to be kind. I remember a friend of mine who is the head of medicine at Duke University, Gene Washington. I remember when we were all in undergrad at Howard, one time Gene said, "Well, Diane, I could see you as a kindergarten teacher." And I really took offense to that at the time. I was saying, "A kindergarten teacher? I'm going to do more than that." But I have matured enough to see the wisdom in what he was saying. If we aren't nurturing and focused and taking care of children who come into the world to make sure that they have a solid foundation, that they can develop well and go strong, because somebody did that for us. We didn't rear ourselves, although sometimes we act like we did. So that's where I learned this from my paternal grandfather, finished Meharry in 1917, and he was one of a small handful of African American physicians in Dallas at the time, which was incredibly segregated. I mean, Jim Crow on steroids. In fact, since we're talking about Atlanta, his Maynard Jackson's father was the minister at Good Hope Baptist Church, where my grandfather attended. And in fact, my grandfather delivered Maynard Jackson, who was the first African American mayor in Atlanta. But in reading my grandfather's notes, and he was talking about medical issues, and he started practicing medicine right before the 1918 flu pandemic that encountered. He said, we have to not have so many vertical structures, because when you put people above other people, you rank them, and in ranking them, you diminish the value of those before. And he was talking particularly about nutrition. He was talking about how to be well, not how you have a health care or insurance system, but how do you maintain good health? He said we need to take those vertical structures, turn them on the sides, and think of them as continuums. When you do that, the nutritionist and the person who teaches you massage, the person who teaches you how to relax and do yoga, the person with whom you engage in terms of producing and growing the healthy food that you need in order to sustain you, all have value and all are part of a process. When you have a horizontal continuum, when you realize that we are in the world as the elders and those who brought us and those to whom we are responsible in the future, who may or may not be born yet, when you make the horizontal your continuum, you don't necessarily have to have a daily victory. You're not exactly baking bread, but what you are doing is you're putting in place a legacy of yours from your work, from your kindness, from your generosity, your experience, your dreams, your visions. So I think if we look at how powerful the words are, how we change structures so that they are empowering for us rather than intimidating. Far too many people try and impress everybody with what they know instead of showing people how much they care. Okay?
No, thank you so much. You reminded me of the quote, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And that
Yes,
really spoke to
absolutely.
me. I do have another question for you.
Okay.
We have time for one more. So as we know, this closing session is called Call to Action. So for people who are ready to do that call to action from being inspired from the conference, like I'm ready, I'm pumped, but don't necessarily know where to start, what would you advise them and to keep fighting this fight?
Well, I mean, it is a fight, but it is also a challenge. And what it is, as much as anything, it's a relearning or unlearning the negatives that we either lost along the way, forgot, or, we just neglected some stuff. Now, there is a definite clock that is ticking. Let's be fully clear about that.
Yes, sir.
And it has been unfair to have communities, frontline communities, communities exposed to toxins. We've had disposable communities. You know, we've after I have I think about Katrina because that just brought it home so crystal clear to so many people when they saw the pictures of how many people died as a result of not being able to have agency or the capacity to move away from the danger that existed when that or any of the subsequent, not natural disasters, but events have occurred where people don't have the capacity to be able to deal with those. We need a society that is more loving and that is more kind. And whether you are a kindergarten teacher, whether you are someone at your church, temple, or synagogue, is the person who bakes something for someone, who makes sure that if you see someone, I can't remember her name, but yesterday she did the good R. I mean, she was inspired by seeing people who were hungry and decided to feed them. Look, we have in all of the world's religions, the basically the bottom line is in all of them, and I don't even know why I use the word bottom line, but they are fundamentally the foundation is how are we in relationship with each other, with our fellow, and we need a really good feminine word for that, don't we? With our other human beings. How are we in relationship? When I mentioned that I wrote the foreword for Women in Green, I talked about one of the things that women have done for eons. And it's not that men haven't done it too, but women come in, you just roll up your sleeves. If the kid is ill or if the kid is sick and throwing up and vomiting, a mother comes in, an auntie comes in, just starts cleaning it up, taking care of things. There is so much that needs to be done. We can have our activism. Two of the young women were talking today about being jazz singers, as if that was something other than being part of this process. The arts have been fundamental historically in being motivational. Just think about, we have a future that we must protect. How do you have, we all have talents. Now, I'm going to take a teeny moment of privilege because on Sunday, Debbie Allen received the governor's award for the Emmy and I could not have been more proud. I was at Howard at the same time that Debbie Allen was. And I
Wow.
thought, you tell me how we don't have any time.
I know I was saying, wow, I love Debbie Allen as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I danced classical ballet for about 23 years. So as another Texas female, I used to dance with Debbie a bit when we were at Howard. I mean, those of us who paid attention knew then that she was going to be it. I mean, she had a vision. When we did our campus Pell programs, it could have been it was Broadway ready. She never did anything that wasn't totally, intensely there. And I count myself lucky to have been fortunate to have been able to spend time and to see that level of brilliance there. And, think about, you are in school now and or you've just been in school, and people who don't go to college too, because this world needs everybody to do this. Everyone has talents. We need to support and nurture each other. We need a much, much kinder world. This, if I have, I'm, everyone that I've known, and I'm trying to not sound maudlin. I've been in a number of bedsides as people were passing. And I remember when Barbara Bush said, nobody asked about spending more time in the, whatever office or whatever it was. But the people that I've seen who are the most satisfied with their lives are those who have spent their lives being engaged with, supporting, loving, and being generous with their spirit, being generous with their talents and what they have to offer. It is, I feel we are here to amplify each other, not to just collect for ourselves or diminish others. One other person who was actually at the conference, in Wangari was there. You Her name is oh, don't do this to me, Diane. Hazel Henderson. Hazel has been one of my sheroes as well, because 30, 40 years ago, she was talking about the love economy. And Hazel is tall and statuesque and just fierce. And I've often thought about how much courage that she had to have, because, I would see the men who were the economists who kind of would roll their eyes, little side eye, and kind of snicker when she would talk about the love economy. But that's exactly what it is. Making money for the instance of making money is incredibly hollow at the end of the day. Making money is a tool. You want money so that you can do something for someone else. I have probably too many different stories for the amount of time that we have right now. But because see, Zoe knows this because she's heard me lecture before. But I just think if you focus not inward, but rather focus on outward and give and engage, you will have gifts and abundance that will come back to you at such large amounts that it is its own reward. Maybe that's the best way to just say it.
No, thank you. And as we talked about yesterday, you can't take your money with you to the grave, but you can leave behind a smile or a legacy behind. So thank you for that.
Yes.
We have about 4 to 5 minutes left, and I have one last question for you.
Okay.
So my question for you is, what is the difference between being involved in the community and being a community activist?
What was the first word swallowed? The difference between being what?
Between being involved in a community and then being a community activist. Do you think there's a difference?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think. I think the important point is one needs to be in a community and of a community and part of a community. And whether your community is, and with the internet, and there've been a lot of virtual things, and I've heard so many people as they start sessions, Zoom sessions or whatever system they're using, and they start apologizing that we can't all be together, and they give all the things that are negative about what you don't have with Zoom. And I happen to think, I had a friend, she was the first female African, Black African bishop. I'm Anglican, and it was unfortunately she passed away because of COVID. But in having her funeral, we were able to do it virtually. So there were people who participated from California, from Iowa, from all across the continent, from the UK, from Brecon in Scotland, who would not have been able to do that had we not been doing it virtually. So there may be things that are less than and diminished, but then more importantly, let's think of what we can do, the way we can democratize access and communication in ways that we never dreamed about being able to do it, and save, some carbon atoms in the process as well. Now, have we left enough time? Because I really, really have to read my Women's Creed.
Oh, this is perfect time. I was going to say we have about a minute left till you can read your poem.
It's a little bit longer, but
Oh,
I'll squeak it in. The one thing I want you to understand is this was written for, the UN. I did a lot of stuff at the UN over the years. In 1995, so that's before probably 50% of the people who are participating were born. But there was the fourth World Conference on Women that was held in Beijing. And it was, at least in the United States, the press was famous for Hillary Clinton's speech that she was the first lady at the time. Her speech at the time was women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. What I was interviewed by CNN coming back afterwards, and I always found it poignant to have a way of describing something. And my comment was because one country, the conference, the before that had been in Kenya, they I, it may not have been Kenya, but the conference was in Nairobi. One country sent an entire delegation to the World Conference on Women without a single woman on the delegation. So here we are in 1995 in Beijing. And I said, I watched and saw the fourth World Conference on Women become the women's first conference on the world. And it has been that way in terms of looking at women's leadership. The benchmark there was Women Hold Up Half the Sky. Or the group we do, the Women's Environment and Development Organization, which is still extant. In fact, they're going to have a 4-day fabulous conference on starting tomorrow on women's leadership in climate justice space. And I hope you go online and look up We Do and take part in that over the next 4 days. But Robin Morgan, who is a wonderful poet, Sisterhood is Global, was the lead who, with a group of people, put together what became the Women's Creed. And for the last 30 years, I have been using this because it is so poignant. And here it goes. Yes, I am a drama queen, but that's okay. We are female human beings poised on the edge of the new millennium. We are the majority of our species, yet we have dwelt in the shadows. We are invisible, the illiterate, the laborers, the refugees, the poor, and we vow no more. We are the women who hunger for rice, for home, for freedom, for each other and for ourselves. We are the women who thirst for clean water and laughter, for literacy and for love. We have existed at all times in every society. We have survived femicide. We have rebelled and left clues. We are continuity, weaving future from past, logic with lyric. We are the women who stand in our sense and shout, yes! We are the women who wear broken bones, broken voices, minds, broken hearts. But we are the women who dare whisper no. We're the women whose souls no fundamentalist cage can contain. We are the women who refuse to permit the sowing of death in our gardens, our air, our rivers, and our seas. We are each precious, unique, necessary. We are strengthened and blessed and relieved in not having to all be the same. We're the daughters of longing. We're the mothers in labor to birth the politics of the 21st century. We are the women men warned us about. They tried, but well, anyway. We're the women who know that all issues are ours, who will reclaim our wisdom, reinvent our tomorrow, question and redefine everything, especially power. We have worked now for decades to name the details of our need, rage, hope, vision. We have broken our silence and exhausted our patience. We are weary of listening refrains of our suffering to entertain or simply be ignored. We are done with vague words and waiting, famishing for action, dignity, and joy. We intend to do more than merely endure and survive. They have tried to deny us, to define us, to denounce us, to jail, enslave, exile, gas, break, beat, burn, and even bore us. Yet nothing, not even the offer to save their failed system, can grasp us. For thousands of years, women have had responsibility without power, while too many men have had power without responsibility. We offer those men who risk being our brothers a balance, a future, a hand. But with or without them, we will go on. For we are the old ones, the new breed, the natives who came first but lasted, indigenous to an utterly different dimension. We're the girl child in Gambia, the grandmother in Burma, the woman in El Salvador and Afghanistan, Finland and Fiji. We're whale song and rainforest, the depth wave rising huge to shatter glass power on the shore, the lost and despised who weeping stagger into the light. All this we are, the people speaking who will no longer wait and who cannot be stopped. We are poised on the edge of the millennium, ruin behind us, no map before us, the taste of fear sharp on our tongues. Yet we will leap. The exercise of imagining is an act of creation. The act of creation is an exercise of will. All this is political, and all this is possible. Bread, a clean sky, active peace, a woman's voice singing somewhere, melody drifting like smoke from the cook fires. The army disbanded, the harvest abundant, the wound healed, the child wanted, the prisoner freed, the body's integrity honored, the lover returned, the labor equal, fair in value, no hand raised in any gesture but greeting. Secure interiors of the heart, home, land so firm as to make secure borders irrelevant at last. And everywhere, laughter, care, celebration, dancing, contentment, a humble earthly paradise in the now. We will make it real. We will make it our own. We will make policy. We will make history. We will make peace. We will make it available. We will make mischief. We will make a difference. We will make love. We will make the connections. We will make a miracle. We will make ready. Believe it. Oh, yes, my sisters and my brothers, believe it, for we are the women who will change the world. Thank you.
Beautiful job. You belong on Broadway, Diane. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to work with you. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But again, thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. This is Lizak. Zoe
Yes,
and Diane, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful, inspirational closing to this conference. This has been an absolutely amazing time. When I first stepped out at the beginning of this conference, I mentioned that we had close to 1,000 people who registered for this conference. It's clear that this topic, women and climate justice, is resonating with people across the country and across the world. I have to say, over the past 2 days, we have heard from inspirational speakers from all walks of life, from all sectors. And I hope that we all leave with what we just had, which is a call to action, and that all of us feel that call to action. As I reflected over the last 2 days, 4 things came to mind. Now I know you're supposed to have 3, but there were so many that I had to go with 4. So first was that we have to act. When we opened the conference, when Jira Matai gave this so profound image of a child on a road and a bus that is coming, and challenged us. If we saw that child on the road and we knew that bus was coming, we would act. It is the same thing with respect to climate change. We have to act for all of our children. We have to defeat climate change. The other thing that I learned throughout this conference is the importance of having the information to be able to act. That we can have emotion, we can care, we need all those things. But we have to have bows in our quiver. We have to have the information to be able to convey why our action is so important. And again, we had the opportunity over the past 2 days to hear from experts, to gather that information. But there's much more that we can do in this area. And whenever we go forward, we should be armed with that information. The other thing that I heard is that action is taking place around the world and across sectors. We had the opportunity at Agnes Scott to bring together leaders, women's voices
from across the globe, from the private sector, from government, from education, from not-for-profits, that in every one of those sectors, people are taking action today for climate change. So we're not alone, but we're also stronger together. And I am so grateful that at Agnes Scott, we've been able to bring those people together. So my fourth thing is that we have to have all voices at the table. We have to ensure that there are women at the table. We have to ensure that there are diverse voices at the table. Several people mentioned Shirley Chisholm, but I have to say, I also love Chandra's addition to that. Not only bring your folding chair, but if you have to, remake the table so that there's room for you at it. So I hope that everyone who participated in this conference has their list of action items. At Agnes Scott, we have our action items. We are going to continue to develop global leaders, many of whom you met throughout these past 2 days. We are also going to work toward climate neutrality by 2037. I hope you all have your action items as well. Before we leave, I want to thank our sponsors, BlackRock, J.C. Anderson Foundation, Georgia Power, and the Turner Foundation. I also want to thank all of our students, faculty, and staff who worked so hard to make this conference possible. And if that wasn't enough, if they weren't working hard enough to make this conference possible, they were already working on next year's conference. So I am excited to announce the working theme for next year's conference. That theme is Leading Inclusively, Transformative Change Across the Globe. Next year's conference will create a platform for highlighting impactful, inclusive leadership practices from across the world, featuring activists and leaders from not-for-profits, education, government, and industry. So stay tuned for information about next year's conference. We hope to see you all then. In the meantime, be safe, be well, act now and together. The fight for climate justice is critical, and together we can make a difference. Thank you all.